dark. I have a phobia that someone's always there.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are here back at you. It's the Source Material Comics podcast, ready to discuss a new book this week. And this week, we are coming at you with Fear Itself. Came out in 2011, according to Mike's Amazing World of Comics. Cover date was June of 2011. On sale date, April 6th of 2011. And the 7th issue, wrapping everything up, not counting the points issues, was cover date of December 2011, on sale date of October 19th, 2011. And here to discuss this book with me tonight, Mark Radulich, of course. Welcome back to the podcast. Mark, you ready to talk some Fear Itself?
It's hammer time, baby.
Hammer time. Are we going to go with that?
Stop. Hammer time.
All right. You just sing the intro, and I'll put it on the front, and that's all we need to do.
Stop.
Hammer time. All right. And coming.
I've always wanted to tell you that you are both smooth on the floor and magic on the mic.
Every time they see me.
Magic on the mic. Evan Bevins, you just heard his voice there. Evan Bevins, welcome back to the Source Material Comics podcast. We're jumping into Fear Itself. Are you ready, sir?
You know, I've never been nervous before one of these podcasts, but I realized that I had nothing to fear except fear itself.
Oh my gosh.
You mean said by that crippled commie?
Hey, there's the voice of Pat Mullins, everybody.
Somebody insert politics into these comics.
Oh, Pat Mullen, welcome to the podcast, sir. Are you ready to talk?
Are we recording?
Yes, we are recording, sir. Are you? Okay, so we're all here. We're all accounted for. We're hopping into Fear Itself. Mark Radulich, tell us why we are going to be discussing this book tonight.
Because we discussed Heroes in Crisis over the summer, and I had to bump the date back, rather. It's also Halloween season, so this was originally scheduled as part of Marvel Event May. We ended up switching dates, and we bumped Heroes in Crisis up. So I just moved Fear Itself to October, figuring, this will be, it'll fit nicely in the horror genre, scary stories, comic book kind of a thing. So that's the only reason. Turns out it's a lot less scary than I thought it was going to be.
At one point, this came up. I can't remember when we were talking about it. I don't know if Evan brought it up or somebody had brought it up. I know that Justin Thomas was a big fan of this story, and unfortunately, he was not able to make it on here tonight. I remember hearing a little bit about what happened here where, these hammers got dropped. Mark, you want to go ahead and say stop hammer time real quick?
Why?
Okay. Yeah, I have no idea because you like to beat shit into the ground. I don't know, but I wanted to give you your opportunity. But yeah, I remember hearing a little bit about this story, but I've never read it up until we had obviously the opportunity to cover it here on the show. Last time me and Pat were talking, it was on our BH 90210 show, and I kind of tossed, the schedule out there. I said, are you interested in doing something? He said, well, Fear Itself sounds like something I might want to be on. So, Pat, why don't you tell me why you wanted to talk about this one tonight?
I think it's the last of these crossovers I read and didn't hate.
This revolves around Asgard, Thor, Odin, and one of the prophecies that supposedly comes true. This feels like it's right up your alley. Is that why you were picking this up? I mean, was this something you were picking up off the shelves?
Yeah, it was a big Thor tie-in, obviously. The prequel story was actually an issue of Thor's new series at the time. And, so it was a big deal. And I was like, oh, well, they're changing the mythology. Let me read it and see where this goes.
Evan Bevins, tell me why you wanted to talk Fear Itself tonight.
Well, there's a really monumental Squirrel Girl tie-in. No, I just I kind of wanted to go back and read it. I wasn't into it. The original, when it was coming out, I think the only one I read was Fear Itself, Youth in Revolt, because Sean McKeever was carrying some of those characters over from the Initiative and Young Allies. Mm-hmm. Love Sean McKeever, love Gravity, love the Initiative. And so I remember going back and reading it and a lot of the tie-ins, and it seemed kind of cool. And I was like, hey, I haven't hung out with these guys online since Onslaught Month. Let's revisit this. And I won't have to force Squirrel Girl into the conversation. It'll just happen naturally.
That's right. I remember now. I remember where this came up. And Mark, it was our conversation with Chris Bailey about Speedball's redemption.
Yep.
Because
Oh yeah.
Ugh.
this was the event where we kind of closed up on the redemption of Speedball, where he finally comes back around and becomes, I think, as Justin Thomas put it, the hero he should have been. You not a Speedball fan, Pat?
How can you be named after something so awesome and be so lame?
That's a drug joke, everybody.
But I'm bummed.
Not
Okay.
a joke with John Belushi.
I unironically love Speedball.
Yes, you. I remember you saying you're a fan of Speedball. I didn't know much about him. Of course, when I hopped into doing that redemption, I learned that redemption arc that we did. I learned a lot about the character, and hey, poor guy. He didn't. How many issues was it before his series got canceled? Evan, did it make it to the
Too many.
20s?
Yeah, not a lot. You can find most of them in finer dollar bins everywhere.
Special appearance by Spider-Man. Well, Fear Itself. All right. Writer Matt Fraction, artist Stuart Eminem, letterer Christopher P. Oh boy, Eliopoulos, colorist Alora Depuy, Laura D. Martin. There we go. All right, so hopped on the wiki, grabbed a little bit of knowledge just real quick.
Wait, Jesse, you forgot the most awesome credit.
Oh, what was that?
The inker.
The inker, which is
Wade von Grawbadger.
That's
Yeah,
right.
the tracer.
I don't feel like any of these are real names.
That's really why I wanted to talk about Fear Itself, so that I could say Wade von Grawbadger.
on the wiki here in my next paragraph, it had the breakdown, the eponymous miniseries written by Matt Fraction, illustrated by Stuart Eminem, Wade von Grawbadger. So lots of tie-ins into this series, but we're just covering the first 7, and there is a 7.1.2.3, which, oh boy, I don't want to talk about numbering systems in the Marvel Universe at this point in time, but there are those out there. We are not going to be talking about those. Those are basically just epilogues. The wiki has this paragraph here where it says that Fear Itself began as a proposed Captain America Thor crossover by Matt Fraction. The storyline was first announced by then Marvel editor-in-chief Joe Quesada, Vice President Executive Editor Tom Brevoort, and Vice President and X-Men Group Editor Axel Alonso.
Let's boo him just for editing piece of shit books known as X-Men.
He's a mutie hater, ladies and gentlemen. Just putting that out there.
Dirty, stinking muties.
Quesada explained that, like the 2006 storyline Civil War, the storyline of Fear Itself was inspired by the real world, in particular the perceived malaise and fear evoked by the late 2000s events such as terror alerts, oil spills, the Great Recession, and partisan politics.
Also, all those hammers falling all over the world.
Yes, I remember that. And it was, it was Thor's Day, and it was, no. It was a Thor's Day. All right, let's get into this. I'm just going to here's what we're doing. I'm going to synopsis the first 4 issues. I have some talking points about each issue. You guys hop in with whatever. First 4, and then issues 5 through 7, and then we'll talk about our final thoughts. All right, so yeah, I'm just going to be right out there and let everybody know. I'm reading from the synopsis page of issue 5 to kind of consolidate what happens through of issues 1 through 4. So here we go. A time of uncertainty and fear grips the world. Sin, daughter of the Red Skull, has released the mysterious serpent from entombment at the bottom of the Marianas Trench. The serpent's mystic hammer empowers Sin, transforming her into his herald, Scotty. The serpent summons his worthy, causing 7 additional hammers to fall from the heavens and strike all over the world. Each hammer transforms its destined wielder into an unstoppable engine of destruction to rampage in the serpent's name. Learning of the serpent's escape, Odin and the Asgardians withdraw from Earth to begin preparations to burn the planet in order to destroy the serpent. While the Avengers rally to humanity's defense, the serpent's fear-fed power reaches critical mass, and rejuvenated, he raises his dark castle and advances on Asgard. When Thor attempts to intercede, the serpent reveals to him that he is Odin's brother, the true true exiled king of Asgard before casting Thor away. The Thunder God comes to ground in the midst of the hammer-wielding Hulk and Thing, and the battle is joined. Yeah, boy, that issue 4 finale there where he just kind of looks up at the sky, and I think Hulk and Thing are coming right at him. These are transformed Hulk and Things, by the way.
Yes, angrier and no.
Yeah, so I want to start with you, Pat, real quick, just about the concept of this. Any of these, the hammers, has that ever been touched on that you're aware of in the issues of Thor, or what you've read anyway? Has this been something that's ever been mentioned?
No, this was pretty original, which is part of why I was so intrigued by it when it happened. There's been other hammers that were issued or made over time. You have Beta Ray Bill had his hammer, Stormbreaker. You had Eric Masterson had gotten Thunderstrike, which was a mace. But you didn't have kind of the idea of, I guess, for lack of a better way to phrase it, evil hammers that were dropped. And the idea of Kull, the brother of Odin, the serpent, and how it changes the prophecy of Ragnarok was very cool because that hadn't been touched on ever.
The prophecy of the brother, that has never been talked about before.
No, because just like in the actual Viking myths, the whole thought of Ragnarok was that Thor is fated to die in battle with the serpent. Now, this was always believed to be Jormungand, the Midgard serpent. When now we're finding out that Odin had kept this hidden to not only prevent him from ever coming back, but to also not have Thor die and have the prophecy of Ragnarok fulfilled.
You know anything about Sin there, Evan? This Red Skull's daughter, had she ever showed up in anything that you've read prior to this?
She was around in the storylines surrounding Civil War. She was part of the conspiracy that got Cap killed or cast adrift in time or whatever it was that happened. So she had been around. I do not remember the specific story where she started to look like Dad. I mean, she was just a redhead with freckles and, a terrible bloodlust before.
Okay.
So I don't remember when she got the extreme makeover. But yeah, she had been around.
Okay. Mark, do you have anything that you really like coming out of these first 4 issues?
And we talked about this with a lot of these crossovers where it's like, I don't need to know what's happening with Spider-Man over yeah, but I would have liked a little bit more fleshing out of the effect that Scotty was having on the collective psyche of Earth. Because you get a little bit of that at the onset of the story.
That's why you have to buy the tie-ins.
No, and that's my point, Pat. I don't want to have to buy the tie-ins for more detail in the story. If they want to tell me that the Punisher ran down someone with a hammer on 42nd Street or something like that, that's fine, and I don't need to read it. But when your major thrust of the plot is that an entity has come to Earth to declare the end of humanity, and it feeds on anger and fear, show me how that anger and fear is being carried out by the people on the planet. There was a little bit of that in the beginning, but that's like all set up. And then she unearths the hammer, and then it's more about
hammer time.
It's more about hammer time. It's more about various Marvel heroes or villains having been corrupted by the hammers, and then them just destroying things. This is going to be one of the few times I said I wish this had a few more issues to it. So one, there was a little bit more fleshing out the fear and anger after they showed up and how it was affecting the everyday person. And then I would have liked to have seen a little bit more destruction from the folks with the hammers, but they introduced Atuma as one of the people. I didn't even see where he got the hammer or what he did with it. He just kind of shows up in a panel somewhere amidst all the other ones all getting their hammers. So, and I know as Pat just said, you have to buy the tie-ins. No. Write your story in the main book and then save the other details for the tie-ins elsewhere that I don't give a shit about. But these are
how are you supposed to sell issues?
But these are supposed to. But I think the point that I'm saying is they leave out crucial details of the main story and they designate it to another book for that purpose. But I think then they're taking away from their main story.
Would you have liked to have maybe a little bit more of a recap of what happened, or because they clearly can't fit everything into a 7-issue event they're
But
going
no, that's
to have
why I said, like, go to 10 then.
You're not going to be able to fit it into that either, I don't think. This would be something that would probably last over a year if you were trying to fit all of these subtle details or these details into it. That's what I think would happen. I mean, there might be ways to do that, but I honestly think that it would be extended well past where you want it to end.
You could have still had a little bit more, like with, and I forget what book Atuma was in. I think it tied in with Alpha Flight. Another reason I was excited, although by that point I'd made my peace with Alpha Flight being dead. And then they came back, except Vindicator didn't have enough toes or something.
I was going to say, yeah, it wasn't really Alpha Flight back.
Yeah. But I think Atuma showed up there. But yeah, I was expecting more, and I was just like, oh yeah, Atuma. Wait, that's it?
That was it.
Atuma did more with the Atlantis attack storyline years ago with, half the power he's commanding that he had here.
Yeah, this is a character that I think was Atuma in the Speedball one that we read, Mark, where was he the one like attacking Newfoundland?
Yeah.
I can't remember. Okay.
I know I'm not Mark, but he was in
that's all right. Yeah, okay. That's what I thought. So yeah, he's showing up in different books. I mean, there were people that hardly even got named. Like you didn't get to see Absorbing Man get his hammer. I know that he was about to. I think Titania ends up getting her hammer, and she's like, "Hey, we'll head north and we'll get yours." Don't see him get one. I don't even remember the Gray Gargoyle getting one. He's listed at the beginning of the book of having one.
But see, you're making my point for me where in the service of trying to sell as many books as possible, which I do understand, yay for capitalism, I don't feel like they gave enough service to their actual main storyline. And I think this is where, while I understand the need to weave some of this into tie-ins, I still feel like you need to have a strong central narrative in your main book. And and while I think there's a germ of a good idea here, I think that's my biggest takeaway from Fear itself is this story feels incomplete because I'm not reading the 50 other fucking tie-ins that went along with it.
Now, I do think there would have been a way to give us a panel or a recap with everybody getting their hammers, like Atuma and Absorbing Man, without extending it to multiple issues. Although, since then, just about every event that happens does get extended to multiple issues, and usually you can see the downside of that. But we talked about the Secret Invasion a while back, and I kept going, well, in this tie-in and in this tie-in, but I feel like they did a better job setting up those things. Like we talked about, hey, the Fantastic Four disappeared, and then they came back in the last issue in Secret Invasion. But, you knew the Fantastic Four was in the negative zone. Now they're not. If you wanted to find out more, you could.
Go to your local library.
Yeah, but you didn't. You knew why the Fantastic Four hadn't been in from issue 1 to issue 6 or whatever.
I know Civil War 2 isn't well loved by a lot of comic book fans, but I feel like Civil War 2, Secret Invasion, some of the other ones we've read this year, I didn't feel like I was missing entire chapters of the story. This one felt like I was reading it straight through, and I'm just like, the whole pieces of this narrative are missing. And then I realized, like, oh, it's probably because they followed this up in 900 other books.
Mm-hmm. Evan is usually Captain Tie-In, but Pat, were you buying any tie-ins for this one when this was coming out?
I guess if you consider the main Thor series a tie-in, then I bought that.
Okay.
Aside from that, I'm trying to remember because I think there was one I bought where it was oh yeah, you know what I remember? I read the Hulk versus Dracula miniseries.
Yes. I saw that one pop up in an advertisement at the
end. Which I totally missed.
I had no idea that occurred. Hulk versus Dracula. Yeah, that happens after the fight because Thor sends Hulk into the atmosphere, practically into space, and he comes back down, I guess, wherever Dracula's residing in the Marvel Universe.
He hit him so hard in the heart of New York that he landed in Transylvania.
It's a pretty tough hit right there. Pretty tough hit.
Here, I'll give you a positive thing to say because now I feel like I'm being too negative. So a couple of years back, I read I think it's the 15-issue storyline, and I've talked about this a bunch, where Banner and Hulk started off as separate, and Banner was like on an island by himself, experimenting on animals, trying to turn himself back into the Hulk again, and the Hulk is just out there hunting moose and shark. Like I told you, like I want that panel.
You mean moose and squirrel?
And now for something completely different. So I've talked about that iteration of the Hulk itself. Apparently, this is what led to that. Because I remember as in the last issue, as they were doing the epilogue, like to be continued, like the Hulk separates himself from Banner, and Banner's just like left out in the desert.
He has no idea,
no clue, and Hulk's just like deuces, bitch, and just walks off.
He leaves. He is straight up out of there. Mark, what do you think of the concept of the kind of the unrest of the times being one of the focal points of the book?
Well, it was only 8 years ago, but boy, is that relevant now, huh? Like, if the writers of this thing were editorializing on the state of the national conversation and the tenor of at the very least the American social contract, nothing has gotten any better in 8 years. In fact, it's gotten markedly worse.
Yeah, have Elizabeth Warren dropping hammers everywhere.
So that'd be interesting to see.
I love the part in the first issue where, and I still don't understand why Captain America, as the head of S.H.I.E.L.D. and all this stuff, is in New York for a simple riot. But you know, I love the idea. He gets the Avengers together and he's like, okay, figure out who made this happen. You know, was it mystical? Was it psychic? And they're like, nah, people just suck, Cap. And
yeah, that was great.
Just the idea that Cap's like, okay, I need something I can punch. This isn't how people are supposed to act. And, you know, he's like, I need a Nazi to throw a shield at. Give me something to fight. And it's like, nah, man, people are just mad and scared.
Speaking of Cap, I kind of want to bounce off of that. I went into this expecting Steve Rogers' Captain America as being on the ground there at first. And then I realized that is not what we're getting. We actually get Bucky as Captain America here. By issue 3, after all the crap breaks out, you know, Scotty gets her hammer and everybody else gets their hammer and the serpent arises. Cap Bucky, dies at the hands of Scotty or / Sid.
Really gruesomely, too.
Yeah, it's not pleasant. So, Pat, do you remember when Bucky bit the dust in this one?
Not as vividly as I remember when he bit the dust during World War II.
When he hopped on a rocket and was that what happened? If I remember right,
he and Cap were trying to defuse a bomb and a loaded plane. Cap and Bucky they broke free, but the explosion, Cap was frozen in ice because of the super soldier serum, and Bucky was believed to have been dead.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So was that a big moment for you at all when this Bucky bit the dust, or this Cap, I should say, Cap Bucky? I wasn't reading
Bucky Cap. That's the popular nomenclature.
Bucky Cap. Thank you.
Spider-Man actually calls him that in an issue of New Avengers.
Do you remember this being a big deal there, Pat, at all for you?
No, because I at no point believed he was actually dead.
Okay. All right. So how about you, Evan? This is something I had listed down here as a big deal in issue 3, at least, is when Bucky gets stabbed through the chest. Any other moments was that a big one for you, or any other moments that stuck out to you?
The one that jumped out to me more that I didn't remember from the first time I read this were some of Bucky's lines. Scotty's blasted him once, and Black Widow and Falcon are trying to get him up, and she's like, we got to fall back, we got to evacuate, and he goes, to where? To what? It's here, it's now, there's no tomorrow if we don't hold the line. What, you want to grow old and retire? And then at one point, he's taking on Scotty, and he goes, what, you think you're the first giant girl with a hammer and no face that's tried to kill me? And just him taking her on, I always called him Bucky Cap, and I knew he was just keeping the shield warm for Steve Rogers eventually. But I wrote in my notes, I'm like, man, forget Bucky Cap. He is Captain America. And then he gets stabbed through the chest, and I'm like, oh, okay, he was Captain America. Yeah, I just remember that as, yeah, okay, this is the place where Steve came back like we all knew he eventually would. But reading that issue 3, I was like, man, he wasn't just a placeholder. I mean, he was living up to the legacy right there.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed the face-off between the Hulk and Thing against Thor, where Thor's like, I've always liked you, Ben, but he's talking to the Hulk. He's like, you've always been
a giant pain in my ass.
Yes.
Ben Grimm gets that hammer. I didn't expect him to be one of the ones that gets the hammer.
Yeah, that's the one that I didn't get then, and I don't quite get it now. I mean, they touched on it with that guy talking to him when the hammer's on Yancey Street. Oh, hey, you couldn't even protect the torch. So I guess it's the fear that, going on in Ben Grimm's mind. he made the least sense to me of all the people who got these hammers. I mean, they didn't do much with Grey Gargoyle in the series, but with the tie-ins, I mean, what he did was he turned all of Paris to stone, and they really played up just how horrible that was. And I mean, then he's fighting Iron Man or someone, and the statues that are actual people are getting destroyed.
Yeah, it was Iron Man for sure, because Iron Man makes a mention that Paris was horrific, I think he says in one of these issues. And I was like, well, what the hell happened in Paris? Because it does not even get, other than that one brief mention, I have no idea what occurred.
Yeah, so, I mean, so Grey Gargoyle, he makes sense. Sin makes sense. The Hulk makes sense. Titania, I guess, as long as you don't remember her real name is Skeeter, I'm
guessing
Titania wanted an excuse to have both the Hulk and Thing fight Thor.
Yes. Yeah, the two guys that are always at each other's throat now are possessed, and they're going to go after Thor at the same time.
I was going to say, whatever those little leech things were hanging off of him, I mean, Ben did look pretty creepy. I think Matt Fraction is an awesome writer. I would have liked to hear some of the behind the scenes about how they picked who would get the hammers and stuff, because I'm not saying there's not a reason for Ben to have it, but it just didn't.
It didn't dive, and I also think the biggest missed opportunity with those was Juggernaut.
Oh, yeah.
They didn't do more with Juggernaut.
Well, they did in X-Men, but again, it's the tie-in. They did a really cool, in my opinion, story with Juggernaut over in X-Men.
Yeah, I remember him fighting Colossus and Magic.
And what happened is Colossus appealed to Sidorak, the magical being that's the source of Juggernaut's powers, and said, hey, he's supposed to be your avatar, and he's doing this for someone else. You want someone to wreak havoc in your name? Give me the power. So Colossus actually became the Juggernaut.
Here's my thoughts on the thing. From a sales standpoint, it gets you to buy, in theory, the Fantastic Four stuff, because like, oh, what's he gonna do now that he's got this hammer, and they've got to deal with him in the Fantastic Four. So I think there's that. As far as what's the in-story reason for him to have had the hammer, I never really got a sense that there was any logic to it when the hammers were dropping. But I think
there had to have been, though, because I mean, like, one just falls right by Hulk.
Well, no, there wasn't, to me, and maybe I'm wrong about this, and I just didn't pick up any stated logic in the narrative. I inferred it from what I was seeing.
Right.
And it was, you have a great source of anger in the Hulk. You have a great source of sadness and anger in the Thing. And I think you have a great source of cleavage in Titania. So I think those were the things that, were the reasons why they gave those folks the hammer. It was, I think the common thread for a lot of them was they were just giant hulking beastly creatures. The Absorbing Man's like huge and muscly. The Hulk, obviously, the Thing. They wanted somebody in the water, and I don't think they had a lot of options. I think there were those common threads, but I think that's about it. And again, it wasn't directly stated as near as I could tell.
Titania, I get they referred to her as Breaker of Men, and I think there's been some stories with her that, like, I don't know if she was abused or maybe just felt inferior, but I mean, there was like some resentment toward men in some of her past stories. So I think that had
I wonder
something.
if that's relevant.
What was that?
Shave your pits, Titania.
Was she like one of the ones that was in Secret Wars, the original 1985 series?
Yeah,
okay.
She and Volcana were the ones that Doom transformed in the original Secret Wars.
Pat, real quick, this kind of all hinges upon, or at least gets started, when Asgard is brought down to the Earth by what happened there? Was that Osborn that did that? For some reason, I'm thinking it was. Tell me.
Sentry on Osborn's behalf in the Siege crossover.
Okay, all right. So he brings Asgard down to the Earth. Basically, it crashes, and Odin's pretty pissed off at man. Is that why he's so angry and willing to leave at this point and just be done with it? What's going on there?
That's part of it. The other part of it, though, is like we talked about earlier. He's going to do whatever he can to, one, prevent Ragnarok from happening, and two, despite what a disapproving dad he is, he's going to try to spare Thor.
Hang on, real quick. I got the impression that this was strategery on the part of Odin, where Earth is a pawn, and he's like, well, I'll sacrifice the pawn in order to get myself into a better position to fight the big battle. That was my impression.
That was part of it. I think, and we get in book 6, I have a note, which I know we're not there yet. Odin's jerkishness gets a little more in focus, because the whole time I was like, man, this is like cranky even for Odin. This is, even when Odin's at his jerkiest, he's not usually this bad. So I think that comes into focus more in issue 6.
I'm looking through here, just see if there's any other notes that I want to talk about. Issue 1.
The one I had was in issue 4 when Tony Stark does his offering to Odin of his sobriety. Pretty sure the Merlot he's drinking is Demon in a Bottle in French.
Oh, you're kidding.
Demon in a Bottle is, of course, the famous Iron Man alcoholism story.
Yep. Mark, I think that was one of your first ones he came on here and did with us.
Yep. Before I took over the whole schedule.
And you're like, I like the taste of this. More source material, please. I don't really have much else. I mean, my goodness, Thor gets put in his place in these 4 issues. His dad whips his ass. And then when he decides to stand up for himself, he just says, Mjolnir drop. And now Thor doesn't have his hammer. And then he he takes Thor away and they go into Asgard space.
So I got to know, Pat, you being a big Thor fan and all the masculinity that character represents or used to represent, when you saw Odin just, really like almost emasculating Thor, how did you feel about it as a big Thor fan?
I mean, he's a Scott Father level being. It's, there's certain beings that can do that, especially if it's your dad. So I didn't really have an issue with that, because that's always been kind of the crux of their relationship. Is Odin's always doing some shit just to bring him down, whether he thinks it's good for him or not. It's just how Odin's always been. Going back to the '60s with Lee and Kirby, where at first he was like, you ain't loving this mortal woman, like that's not happening, and did everything he could to stop that, and just dick dad moves that you see made by him throughout history. So it fit right in with their dynamic.
Okay.
Yeah. And of course, Thor is, as always, the champion of Earth. There, he says, he picks man. When Odin looks at him, he tells him to choose. He's like, figure out what you want to do. And he says, I choose man. I choose to defend man.
And Odin's like, yeah, fucking, of course you do.
Yeah, he's like, yep, doesn't surprise me.
As a dad, I get that. Just that total eye roll movement where you're just like, ugh. I can always count on you to make the wrong decision.
And that's him being a mama's boy, since his mom is Gaia, the Earth Goddess. So it also explains why, beyond just his interactions, he has such a deep affinity for Earth.
One more note before we move on to the next one. I think the other biggest beat out of these 4 issues was Steve Rogers putting the red, white, and blues back on, where he actually is wearing the suit, and after dealing with the loss of Bucky, he is ready to go to work. So you see Steve Rogers back in the Captain America suit. I think that's a pretty big deal. Well, let's go ahead. We'll get into issues 5 through 7, Fear Itself. This one, this one, again, this is just going to touch on the basics. We'll go into the little bit more detail here as we talk about it afterwards. Some of this might be a little bit of a repeat, but here we go. Withdrawing from Earth, Odin and the Asgardians begin preparations to burn the planet in order to destroy the serpent. When Thor attempts to intercede, the serpent reveals to him that he is Odin's brother, the true exiled king of Asgard, and that Thor is fated to fall in battle with him. We've already talked about that already. In a last-ditch attempt to fend off the serpent's army from the World Tree in Broxton, Tony Stark forges a set of weapons made of enchanted Uru metal to even the odds for the Avengers. The heroes manage to hold the enemy at bay long enough for Thor to defeat the serpent, take 9 steps, and die in his father's arms. In the aftermath, the Avengers tend to the wounded and mourn their losses, including one of the early casualties of the Serpent's deadly campaign, the current Captain America, Bucky Barnes. Mark, what do you think here of these final 3 issues? Was there any big things that stuck out to you? Give me some talking points.
Well, because I read this in isolation and not as part of it, like an ongoing comic book pickup or anything, when he rips off Bucky Barnes' arm and stabs him through the chest, I was pretty horrified.
Yeah.
I was like, wow. I was shocked. I know nobody ever dies in comic books. I was still, I kind of just accepted it for what it was. And it was a shocking moment for me, such as it was. I felt like in isolation, the story had stakes to it. I really felt like there were real stakes to this story. There were consequences to the actions being played out. The story, I think, had a lot more gravity to me. I don't know. I thought the conclusion came kind of quickly, but it might have just been, it was like, well, we planned this for 7 issues, and we, here we are. So
we got to wrap it up.
Yep, wrap it up.
Let me take you back to issue 5 real quick, okay?
Sure.
Thor battling the Hulk and thing. What'd you think of that battle?
I really liked Thor's kind of reaction to fighting the Hulk, where there's this resentment underneath all of this friendship and camaraderie. I like the fact that he said to Thing, I've always liked you, but the Hulk is a fucking pain in the ass.
Yeah,
I thought that was very true to the character and true to their relationship, which of course the movies have played on as well.
It was this. I can't remember if it was this issue. I'm pretty sure it was this issue. Like at the end of the battle, I think Thor looks at Hulk and says, he's like, I know I can't beat you.
And then Hulk, as Null goes, I know. And then Thor replies, did you? And then hits him to Transylvania.
I thought I was like, oh crap, he's admitting, but then of course, he sent his ass into space. It's crazy.
One of the things I really liked about this whole story was the focus on Thor and Odin and whatnot, because I feel like in a lot of these crossovers, Thor's just kind of hanging around if he's in it at all. He wasn't in the original Civil War. I mean, Robot Thor was, but he's not there, and I feel like he's always just kind of backup. He never really gets a big part of the story, and I thought, Thor, against his father's wishes and maybe better sense and judgment, is with the is always with the mortals. The other thing I really liked about this was I really enjoyed Tony Stark interacting with Odin.
Yeah,
not and for a very specific reason, because the whole thing, Odin almost seems like a villain. He's just like, well, fuck the Earthlings. I'm smarter than the average god. We need to sacrifice them for the greater good. And then he has this conversation with Tony. He's very humanized. Mm-hmm. It's like he demands the respect that is owed to him being the All-Father, but he also has a very human conversation with him. And he's like, well, he's like, and then Tony is doing a very Tony thing. He's like, look, I'm a fighter, but really what I am is a weapons maker.
Yeah,
and that's what whatever happens, if we die, we die, but at least we died on our feet. We died in battle. And so he's like, so I'm not asking you for help. I'm not asking you for mercy. I'm asking you, can I use your workshop, please? Can a man get some Uru? That's all I'm trying to get.
That was another thing that was really fleshed out. I think Fraction was writing Iron Man at this time too, so there was a lot of stuff with like Tony working with the dwarves. I think Split Lip, who gets one mention in this, ends up going to work for Tony after this.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I was going to say there was people that he was interacting with. It seemed like he had, at least 3 or 4 issues of interacting with. It seemed like there was a history, even though it was only this short time. Man, the Thing gets a hammer right through the chest there, Pat Mullen.
That's a moment that we didn't talk about that we should. Because you've got this fight happening where Thor's fighting these enhanced versions of the Hulk and Thing, and he's kind of getting to that point where he's going to eventually cut loose, which he rarely ever does. And finally, he tosses this hammer, and it seems like it was meant for Hulk because of his reaction, where he says, Benjamin, no, realizing what's going to happen, and boom, he's just impaled through and run through with this hammer.
It shocked me. I'll tell you that much. I mean,
that was another shocking moment for me too. I was right up there with Bucky.
Damn, man! I was like, you didn't want to see, Ben Grimm, of all these freaking people that held the hammers. This was the one guy that I didn't want to see get killed. Franklin Richards shows up, and we talked about Franklin Richards at length in our Onslaught episodes. How did it hit you there, Evan, when Thing takes the hammer to the chest?
That was another one that I had forgotten about, and I'm like, I think in my notes I just said, I mean, dang, Thor, him going down like that, and then Franklin, even though aside from the fact that we know everybody comes back, I know the Thing survives this story, but it was still with Val and Franklin there beside him. You're just like, oh man, Franklin always seems to have to deal with this stuff, and I don't remember the specifics that were going on in Fantastic Four at that point where he's talking about he would never use his powers. But yeah, just that point where Franklin's like, look, okay, I know I'm not supposed to do this, but this is my Uncle Ben, and like you said, he doesn't deserve this. He's already lost the torch, for the better part of a whole year. He stayed dead. Mm-hmm. So he's just like, yeah, this isn't happening. I'm using my powers. I don't remember if there were any ramifications, but I know that Reed and Sue would have been like, yeah, you did the right thing.
Yeah. Franklin Richards pretty powerful dude. So, to see the thing get almost killed and then on his deathbed, Franklin Richards heals him in the same issue. I mean, that's great. We don't want to see that character die, but so we got some Uru weapons getting handed out to all the Avengers. Commentary.
People who were just standing near the Avengers.
Just like, here you go. Yeah. Uru is a pretty significant element. Isn't that like what Thor's hammer is made of as well?
It is, in fact, what Thor's hammer is made of. And Uru, that voodoo that you do so well, Split Lip.
Yeah, I mean, did this kind of cheapen things for you, or did this seem like the right way to take things?
I think it was a good idea that went a little bit far. I think if you had, 3, maybe 4 things kind of that made sense in the context of things, like, I get if you would do like an Uru shield for Captain America, a destroyer armor for Iron Man like they did, even like the bow for Hawkeye, and then maybe like one other thing, like the sword they did for She-Hulk.
Mm-hmm.
But they went a little bit far, like Wolverine's Uru claws, Doctor Strange's Uru staff, and Iron Fist's Uru mace. Why does he need an Uru mace? He has the Iron Fist.
Yeah.
Punisher's Uru gun.
That would have been that one would have made more sense. Or Spider-Man's Uru spider thing.
What did he have? What did Spider-Man have? I couldn't figure that out.
They were like
Uru spider pokers.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Or Black Widow's Uru spy gadgets.
All right.
Well, the one that didn't make sense to me was Red She-Hulk. Although I think she's a neat character that they've done some cool stuff with. It's like, I don't know, maybe I missed that time, but it's like, okay, so we're going to give all this stuff to, certain Avengers and Red She-Hulk.
Ironically, that's the weapon that ended up hanging around for a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh, they didn't come and collect everything?
No, she kept her big bleep sword. Yeah, you thought they did, but that showed up. Fraction did a Defenders title that spun out of this that I really, really enjoyed. And Red She-Hulk was in that, but I think at that point Red She-Hulk was a character Marvel was really trying to make happen, and they did some interesting stuff with her, but it's just, I mean, there's nothing bad with what she does in here. They have some nice moments where she's like trying to save people early on when the Hulk's rampaging, but it just, why she's there in the final fight, I don't get.
Mm-hmm.
So I had some difficulties with the way She-Hulk is portrayed here, because in the Hulk comic around this time, this was sowing your wild oats She-Hulk, where Betty was kind of one personality, and then like Betty's id was She-Hulk, and she was like, partying with Tyrannus, and like there were a couple of times where she was palling around with the Hulk, but he would always do something to fuck it up, and she'd be like, you know what, forget you, I'm gonna go do cocaine in the 70s or something. I don't know.
Yeah, she turned into Jenny from Forrest Gump.
But here, it seems like she's more like Jennifer Walters, where like it's her personality is still intact and not, and she isn't like this just id run wild. So I don't know if whoever was working on this really understood the She-Hulk character, but it irked me because I've read a whole bunch of the Hulk stuff from around this time.
There's one other big moment in issue 5. Cap's getting all ticked off, and he looks at the serpent, and he goes, "Oh, you know what I like to play when I was a kid? Catch!" And then the serpent just breaks his shield.
Catches it and breaks his shield. So let's stop
right on Cap's line too.
Let's stop everything right now, and we'll talk about Cap through these three issues, okay? So Cap gets his shield broken in issue 5. In issue 6, he has to. You could see that this character, who is supposed to be, everything that the representation of what America is, you see Captain America have to deal with the fact that there is a very good chance that they're going to lose this battle, and he kind of loses heart, but he doesn't lose direction. Specifically when they have to pick up Thor after he gets, after he collapses. So anyway, he's got, they got Thor on their shoulders, and they're walking past a bunch of citizens, people, and he doesn't want to look like they're retreating, but it looks like, even though he's putting that appearance out there that they're not doing that, you could tell in Cap's heart, it's almost like he's ready to almost accept defeat, or that he's really worried that they're not going to win.
We had a lot of that. We talked about that a lot in Onslaught. Only in that, I kept feeling like they were just saying, oh, look, it's so bad. Cap thinks they're going to lose, and it didn't really connect. But in this one, you're like, man, it's like Cap's like, yeah, I know I got to keep fighting, but I don't know how we're going to pull this off. I mean, This felt a lot more dire than some of the times in Onslaught where they tried to convince us that Cap was losing faith.
At the end of issue 1, he says something, very prominent that kind of sticks throughout the book. And he says something along the lines of, hold on a second. It was, the gods left us. We're on our own. So
to wrestle with that question Bonnie Tyler posed all those years ago. Where have all the good men gone, and where are all the gods?
Captain America is almost a broken man, but he then he still is not going to be the last one leaving. He's still not going to be the one that is not on the front lines of things. When the Serpent comes calling and the Worthy are there, and they're heading to Broxton to meet the World Tree, I think is what's down there. Anyway, he's out there and he's got a gun. No, wait a second. He's got 2 guns, and he tells everybody, if you're leaving, you need to leave your guns. And it's Captain America against with guns in his hands. No Avengers, nobody to kind of back him up, because Thor took off to go battle the Serpent, I believe. Well, I don't know if that happens here or not, but either way,
they're all in Asgard getting healed up and getting weapons.
That's right, because they just dropped Thor off, and Odin's like, okay, he takes his son, heals him up. So that's right. And then Iron Man's getting weapons, so Cap's the only one down there. Anyway, so he's facing the Serpent with these 2 guns in hands, and then we watch his shield get broken, and it's almost like, okay, well, he's, he does feel like he's going to be beaten here. All right, so I don't know who wants to talk about this, but when Thor comes back, he's fighting the Serpent. During that battle, he loses his hammer, okay? Pat, I'm just going to throw it to you, buddy. As the hammer lies on the ground, Cap is looking for a weapon. All the Avengers and Uru Metal have showed up. He's looking for a weapon, and we get our iconic. So you want to kind of let our listeners know what happens.
Thor's lost the hammer at this point, battling Kull. In a fight, it doesn't seem like he's going to win. And then, as he's done in the past once before at this point, Cap reaches down and grabs the hammer, and you get a moment that whoever edited this video on YouTube, God bless you, you made something out of the shitbag movie Endgame. It's almost like you hear it. You hear the touch by Stan Bush playing as he raises the hammer.
This was something that led me to do the Patreon content that's going to be airing before this, and that is, it was issue 390 of Thor. Is that the one where the Mighty Thor 390, where Captain America first picks up
as the captain? Yep,
as the captain. So, what do you think of Cap picking up Thor's hammer there, Evan?
Oh, it's awesome. It was awesome here. It was awesome in Endgame. That's like the gold standard for Marvel heroes. Even though it has been pointed out to me that really you want Odin determining who's worthy and who's the greatest. Regardless, I mean that's a huge moment. Just shows you, okay, that they aren't done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mark Radulich, did that stir any? Did that twist your nipples a little bit, or what'd you think?
Yeah, I totally heard the touch when he picked up the hammer. This isn't the first time that happens, though, right? He's done it before.
Yeah. And Mighty Thor 390 coming out in 1987-88, I think is when it was. So yeah, it's happened before, but it's a rarity. And I mean, it is a
sure. It wouldn't be special if it was happening like well, it's Wednesday, time to pick up that hammer.
Nah, yeah. Well, I mean, of course, and it was all teased throughout the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So yeah, this was kind of a big deal. Now this was 2011 when this came out. What was at this point? I think we had a Captain America film. We did not have an Avengers film at this time, did we?
No.
Okay, that came out in 2012. Yeah. Okay. All right. So anyway,
film was forever changed.
Well,
not for the better.
Don't tell. Oh boy.
I have this great idea for a movie. I'm going to need $200 million though to film it. Does it have a comic book character? No. Well, go fuck yourself then.
Is that how it goes? Is that how those meetings go, Mark?
Yes, that was the memo I got from Hollywood.
Okay. All right. Got it. So, all right. Well, let's, we're getting ready to close up shop. Let's talk about the finale here. Pat, I'm going to go right back to you. This is Thor here. Thor is destined to die in this battle with the serpent, and he is given this sword. What is it called? He calls it's Odin's sword, right? It's the Odin sword?
It is.
And he's tasked with bringing down the serpent, and he apparently dies, right?
As is fated in Ragnarok, he kills the serpent in battle, but dies doing so.
Okay.
And takes his steps after doing it where he's destined to die.
That's a big thing, man. What'd you think?
Very well portrayed, I thought. They kind of teased this, and not this specific confrontation, but they teased the idea of him facing his mortality against the Midgard serpent a couple times, especially if you read the Walt Simonson run that really taps more into the myth than anything else. But the way this was, for all this lacked in terms of like these supposedly big events happening, this was built to fairly well throughout, in my opinion. And I think it delivered. And when you get to that point where Thor realizes he's going to die and takes those last steps, and then you see everybody carry him overhead, that was very well done.
What stood out to me is, like I said, I kept in the earlier issues going, man, what the heck is Odin's problem? I'm used to Odin, being angry and all this stuff, but in issue 6 he's been through this before. I mean, he did something, and I don't know if it elaborated on it in the Thor title, but he did some pretty awful things to stop Kull the first time, and then he knows that if he can't figure out another way, his son's gonna die. So that's why he's all like, well, Earth is screwed. No two ways about it, because he really believes that's the only way. It's not that he doesn't care, but he's not going to stop and look for another solution. And he cares about his kid. He wants to protect his son. And so suddenly it goes from, okay, you're a little bit over the top, to, all right, Odin, I see where you're coming from. Another thing that I liked, you're asking about other notes. There's the scene, I think it's in issue 6, where Spider-Man is going all around New York trying to find Aunt May.
Yeah.
And he goes down and talks to her, and I assume at this point she doesn't know he's Peter, although Aunt May is not an idiot, so she may have figured it out. But it's just that scene where she's like, okay, yeah, I'm okay, but you've got a big responsibility. You've got to take care of these other people, and that's the kind of stuff that'll save the world. Compassion, kindness, selflessness, not killing the other guy faster and harder. Is her saying, okay, I appreciate it. You're helping out Peter. You're taking care of me, but I'm fine. You got to go be a hero now.
Yeah, because at that point, Peter's ready to pack it in.
Yeah.
I mean, he's like, this is it. I mean, he's the one that has the conversation with Captain America. Like, dude, this is pretty bad. I think I need to go be home with my family.
Well, I think at that point also, nothing they were doing was working. And I guess he figured, it's like, well, okay, we now have exhausted all the weapons we have and all the strength we have. Until somebody comes up with a better plan, maybe I can make myself useful in another way. At least make sure my aunt gets off the island of Manhattan before it gets sunk into the Hudson River.
Well, he goes and checks on her, and I think he's going there and he's going to stay with her. But she actually, just like Evan was saying, the words that she gives him, there's the responsibility. I think she even says the words responsibility in there, and he immediately is like, "You're right," and he takes off. Any other notes there, Evan?
I liked the scenes. I know we talked about there wasn't a lot about what else was going on in the world when that was a big part of it, but I liked the scenes interspersed with Thor fighting the serpent and the Avengers battling, of people rising up and helping, of people not being paralyzed by fear, the relief workers coming in, people pulling folks out of burning buildings and stuff like that, showing the counter to all this fear and selfishness and division. I thought that was a nice touch.
Yeah, this has a very cinematic quality to it. I'll be curious to see if this ever makes it into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Some of the stuff we read, it's like, wow, it would be really hard to adapt. I actually think this would be super easy and really lends itself to an adaptation.
Kind of like Ghostbusters 2. Your love lifted me high. Well, no, okay. So
See, I was going too hot to handle, too cold to hold.
oh, they called the Ghostbusters, and they in control.
We really should have patted her feet. I don't think they make Nike in her size, Ray. Drippings with goo.
So the serpent's Vigo then, right?
He's Vigo. Think I paid in.
Yes, it's
Vigo.
Vigo. Vigo.
Nice.
Yes.
You were like the buzzing of flies to him.
Oh, it's great stuff. Great stuff. So yeah, when I started seeing those panels that you're talking about where they were talking, I was like, oh, things are turning. Things are turning. We got to have some goodwill in the world. And I immediately was reminded of Ghostbusters 2. So, anything else there, Evan, before we move into final thoughts here?
No. Do you want me to
yes.
grumpy
Yes.
old man about the epilogues and final thoughts, or
no? Go ahead. Go right now. Tell me what happens in point 1, point 2, point 3.
So in 7.1, which I think when I originally read this, I want to say those were included with the other trade. Maybe they weren't, but I read them soon after. In 7.1, it's revealed that Nick Fury switched Bucky out for an LMD, and he's still alive.
Because of course he fucking did.
Now, see, what did I tell you? I mean, the thing. Oh, nope, he gets healed. We watch Bucky get stabbed through the chest, arm ripped off. Up LMD. It was funny because as I was reading that, somebody wrote in the comments of the issue on Read Comic Online. They put, "Wait a second, did I miss something? Is Captain America a robot?"
Yeah. I mean, he
went wrong.
did get his bionic arm ripped off and stabbed through the chest, but then Fury switched him out and gave him the Infinity formula that kept Fury young, that Mockingbird also got. Apparently, it's not as hard to come by as we were led to believe. And Bucky goes back to being Winter Soldier. And then in 7.2, it wasn't as cut and dried as I remember it, but basically we're told, yeah, Thor's coming back.
Because of course he fucking is.
He ain't dead.
Although, and Pat might know more about this than me, but apparently he was replaced with a new thunder god that was actually Ulick the Troll in disguise.
Yeah, Tannerus. They did a whole big, vague mind wipe of everybody using Norn magics to try to convince everybody that there never was a Thor. Tannerus was always the thunder god, and it was a big plan with Ulick the Troll, and eventually Loki's actually the one who winds up bringing Thor back.
And then 7.3 was actually Iron Man doing cleanup in Paris where all these people have been turned to stone, and he gives Odin another piece of his mind, and Odin unturned to stone all the people. And I know some of this was, where they talked about the gods leaving, and some of the stuff with Odin was probably aimed at some sort of religious commentary or whatever. I've always, just because of my personal beliefs, I've always been leaned toward the, they're aliens who were worshipped as gods or whatever. But when they try to cast Odin as a fill-in for God, it just reminds me how inferior Odin is to actual God, because he's a petty, grumpy old man.
Mm-hmm.
Well, which God? Because the Old Testament God was very grumpy and very petty.
Well,
Sodom and Gomorrah, dude. Okay, the people a little drug using.
Hey, Lot's wife, you had one job.
There's a flood.
Lot's wife, you had one job.
Well, but yeah, I mean, I maybe I don't want to get that deep into it, but
no, he's not the one above all, and he's actually referenced the one above all. So
yeah, they do. That's an interesting thing. Like in a lot of the Infinity stuff and the 90s stuff, they always, no matter how bizarre they get, they always reference that there's a higher power. And I don't know if that was politically correct or that's a whole other thing. But yeah, they have referenced the god in other comics, and I guess I'm
going to take a wild guess that they're trying to not offend people that are like reading comics, having a good old time, and suddenly having their devout Christianity questioned.
Yeah, they don't bother to do that anymore, and nobody's and nobody is required to believe as I believe or anything, but
if you like a little Christianity in your comics, though, go ahead and check out the entire Tomb of Dracula run from the 70s.
Okay.
I can tell you that I've actually read just recently an issue of Tomb of Dracula, and I was really surprised at how good that series is, or at least that one issue.
Great series.
Yeah, I I thought it was really decent. Strange that it's that's the title that you referenced to have some Christianity in it, which I guess it would make sense considering the legend that Dracula's based on.
I have used the issue of X-Men. I think it's an annual where they fight Dracula in a youth Sunday school class and even as a talking point at church before.
Seriously.
Yes.
And Doctor Strange actually channeled Jehovah in order to fight Dracula at one point.
I did read that one, yeah. So
that's crazy.
Like I said, people don't have to believe what I believe, but I appreciate seeing that reflected or at least respected. I mean, Grant Morrison doesn't. I don't think Grant Morrison and I have the same spiritual beliefs, but his portrayal of Zariel in JLA is very respectful and not insulting toward Christians.
And if you hate religion, there's always what's his face from the Flintstones comics.
What is his face? What is his name again? Hold on. I can't remember. Oh, damn. See, I hate trying to think of shit on the spot. Anyway,
I didn't read that, but I did read their crossover with Booster Gold, which the Flintstones Booster Gold one-shot, which was interesting from a religious standpoint.
Why?
That's probably the only standpoint it is interesting in from.
Hey, we haven't had our yearly hour-long talk about polyamory, Jesse. I just want you to know that.
Flintstones. Mark Russell?
That's the one.
There we go. Mark Russell. Oh, boy. Mark, wait till I get you to read some Preacher. That's some fun stuff.
I told you, when the series ends, I'll dedicate an entire week to it. We'll do the show and the book.
I read exactly 2 pages of Preacher, and I was like, you know what? This just wasn't written for me.
This is not for me.
I'm not gonna criticize it because I'm not gonna go through it. So I'm just like, you know what, Garth Ennis, just not gonna read that one.
I read 10 issues of it, and the only stuff I liked was the stuff with Cassidy.
Ah, yeah, his buddy. Well,
I liked it when he punched a guy in the face so hard his hand got stuck in his face.
I remember that. Oh, some good stuff. It's funny that we just had a pretty darn near. I mean, it was fairly religious. I mean, we had a series we just talked about with Hellblazer, and Satan showed up in there, so that was interesting. The first of the Fallen. But all right, let's get back to Fear itself.
So anyway, those were the epilogues, and they made me angry.
Yeah, it's just like you said. It didn't seem like they wanted anything to stick, or at least gave everybody an out. Which is not.
Fraction, he did some kind of interview, and he said something like, "To me, the death isn't interesting. It's coming back that's interesting." I guess. I mean, like I said, I've read too much good stuff by Matt Fraction to just dismiss him. I really like him, but we all knew they were going to come back, but to have it as literally like tacked on at the end of the series,
quick.
Not even one of those things like a teaser at the end or a stinger in the credits to let you know, hey, maybe there's. It was just like, yeah, that stuff that just happened, it's over.
But I think even his answer, though, lacks a lot of integrity because, I didn't want to cut you off, but as soon as you said that, my first thought was, it's just like, like, I don't want to comment, criticize the guy or whatever. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm sure he enjoyed cashing the fucking checks. And I can almost guarantee you, I don't buy that as his real answer. Death isn't very interesting. It's coming back. I'm pretty sure it was, well, I want to kill all these people and really give this lasting stakes. And they were like, okay, but here's a paycheck that says you're not going to do that. And it was like, all right, well, mortgages and stuff. I get it.
How about I make it look like I kill him and then I bring him back?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I don't mean to say I don't want to criticize him. I'm just going to, what I meant was, I like Matt Fraction's writing enough that I'm not just going to go, well, this idiot can't write or can't tell a story. It's just like, I didn't care for the way he did it.
Oh, I don't remember if you were on our Hawkeye show. We did Matt Fraction's Hawkeye. And I'm like anxious now for the Disney show, so I have an excuse to go back to that because it's really good.
Oh, yeah.
He's not a bad writer. And again, this is kind of for me, sort of the film parallel. There's always like the director and screenwriter, and then there's studio notes.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times like, oh, this is a bad movie. movie, and it's the director's fault, it's the writer's fault, it's whatever, and it's like you don't know what the intention of the director was, because the films get caught up in studio notes all the time. If you read the backstories in some of these films where it's like, you want to do this, this, and this, and this, and it's like, okay, but throw a giant spider in there. Well, fuck me. Things like that. So you never know. And we've done so many of these stories where I think even you talked about it with Onslaught, where it was like, well, the creative team wanted to do X, and the editors told them to do Y, and it was like, this causes people to find other work where they're not going to be, they're not going to have their hands tied.
Yep, and that's a lot of the drive at going and reading independently published comics or stuff that's at Image.
A lot of these people who do these big Marvel events, they reach their peak at Marvel, and then they go off and do their own thing.
Mm-hmm. And it's probably because the taste is a little sour of not being able to do what they want to do. That's when we get a chance to do Black Hammer, that's going to be a fun one. I know we're going to probably do that sometime in the future, because that is a guy, huh?
Is that the name of your porn?
Yeah. Yes, sir. That is a guy who took very, very similar archetypes from the big two, and as much as it seems like it's a ripoff, he spins a great tale because he has nothing to tie his hands with. I'm on board for that series. Whenever I can get a chance to read the rest of it, I will. I've read the first two trades and really liked it.
Yeah, and Jeff Lemire, I'm a big fan of his too, and he's had big moments at Marvel and DC both, and
yeah.
As I'm sitting here and it sounds like, I hate editors, I hate bosses, I hate studio notes, and I do. I am all for having an adult in the room to edit people and not let them go crazy, because when you don't, you get fucking Joey Janela versus Jimmy Havoc. So I there has to be a happy medium between I just want to do my art and having something overwrought with studio notes.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into final thoughts and anything left unsaid. Pat Mullen, anything left unsaid and final thoughts, sir?
So one of the things, and I don't know why this is it just occurred to me while rereading this, briefly, the part where Thor is really kind of accepting his fate when he's going to have to fight Kull and understands that he's got to die to do it. It's a very oddball reference. However, what it reminded me of was the WrestleMania 7 match between the Ultimate Warrior and the Macho Man, when at one point Warrior hits the press and the splash and covers Macho, and 1, 2, Macho kicks out. He kind of just doubts himself at that point, and he's like, is this my destiny? Looking at his hands, like, what happened? Like, is this how it ends? Is this how it's going to be? It kind of reminded me of Thor getting beat down by Kull at one point, and then instead of that, he just kind of sucks it up and goes, nope, we're going all the way with this. That's the thing that stuck out to me. It was like watching that play out in a comic book.
All right, Evan, anything left unsaid? Final thoughts, man.
I didn't talk about Squirrel Girl.
Oh, no, you didn't. Did that have a tie-in?
Well, this was before Squirrel Girl had her own series, but at the time she was a supporting cast member in New Avengers, where she was the nanny to Luke Cage and Jessica Jones' baby.
Aww.
And at one point during one of the attacks, she is trying to protect the baby, and Daredevil saves her, which leads to Daredevil officially joining the Avengers.
Okay.
This was the New Avengers at the time, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that.
Oh, my goodness. I was going to ask you something.
That was when Squirrel Girl was just more of a curiosity instead of my favorite comic book character ever.
Though this happens before, I mean, she doesn't blow up in 2011, right? I mean, she really starts to ground like what, in 2015, 2016?
Yeah, 15. The first issue actually showed her still living in the attic at Avengers Mansion, with everybody like kind of forgetting she was there. So, but she soared to amazing heights after that.
Yeah, she did.
And in at least one possible future, she is the leader of the Avengers.
Okay, and there's that. So what'd you think of Fear itself overall?
I enjoyed it, especially the second time around. I like the concept. Mark's right. They could have done a better job just filling in some of the gaps. I mean, that's the way these events work, is there's an overall thing and stuff gets fleshed out, and it's a balancing act to give make the tie-ins worth reading, but also not undercut the main story. But overall, you had some good beats for the big three of the Avengers. It also spun off into a pretty cool Defenders series that I think was meant to last longer than it did. Basically, Null, Hulk's alter ego, is still around, and he goes and gets the Defenders together and says, but I can't go near that thing. And so it's, Doctor Strange, Namor, Silver Surfer, and then Iron Fist and Red She-Hulk. And they go on this just utterly bizarre series of adventures that's kind of hard to follow. And like I said, I think it cut off, but the ending to it is just absolutely fantastic.
Okay. All right. Well, Mark Radulich, final thoughts? Anything left unsaid, sir?
I enjoyed the book. Can't wait for the movie.
Of course. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that brings our discussion of Fear Itself 1 through 7 to a close. And right now we'll go ahead and get into plugs here. Pat Mullen, you're up first, buddy. What do you got to plug here, man?
So here's a funny story for you.
Okay.
So this past weekend was supposed to be a heavyweight fight between Usyk and Tyrone Spong, kickboxing star, and Mark wanted to do live coverage of it. So what happened was Spong got popped for pissing hot, right? And so then they replaced him with a guy who hadn't had a meaningful fight in years, and just the usual shenanigans.
How dare you talk about the IBF heavyweight champion?
I'm pretty sure that's not what the case was. So, anyways, so I tell Mark, I'm like, listen, since that's a non-fight, it's a non-fight anymore. If you want to actually watch another heavyweight fight from the past, I will broadcast with you since his other partner checked out on the show. Mark says, no, I really want to watch this fight, which wound up being one guy throwing like 20 punches over the course of 7 rounds.
Sounds exciting.
I enjoyed myself, and so did Robert, and we did live coverage. So yeah.
So,
how'd that work out for you?
I mean, we had a good. Robert and I always have a good time.
So Pat's plugging a show he didn't do, which is probably a first.
There's a banger. There's a banger this Friday, but he's doing Impact, and you may or may not be working and/or banging and/or drunk. So
I resent all of that. Thank you very much. I will challenge Mark to this. So you watch these crappy fights. You ask me to do these crappy fights with you. So how about if I do these crappy fights, you have to take a trip through heavyweight history with me?
Okay.
That sounds cool.
Yeah.
Sounds like a trade-off. Good trade-off.
Yeah, no, I'm always Pat. I never say no to you or anybody else. I'm the biggest whore in podcasting.
That's fair.
All right. Well,
Put that on the business card.
You guys are going to have to figure out something to call that so we can plug it officially on here whenever it happens. So, all right, Evan Bevins, go ahead, sir. What do you got to plug here, buddy?
Let's see. Well, still check out the support group on Webtoons, a webcomic about a support group for people with lame superpowers. I am working on. Have I ever told you guys that I'm a big fan of Squirrel Girl?
No. That's news to me.
Unbeatable Squirrel Girl, sadly, is ending with issue 50 next month, so I'm working on a column for Graffiti on the 10 greatest moments from my favorite comic book run ever. So that'll be coming up. And I did remember something else I had to plug. You can actually find me on Comixology.
Ooh.
Writing someone else's coattails.
Congratulations, Evan.
Michael Easton of the Kapow.
Yeah.
GoPro. Michael's creator-owned Impossible Family #1 is available on Comixology, and he had me in the first issue and in the upcoming second issue flesh out his world with some newspaper stories, combining what I do in real life and what I would like to do in real life, as I am a mild-mannered newspaper reporter. And so it's Michael's blood, sweat, and tears, but I do have a writing credit on there on Comixology for some articles, some backup features.
Well, Mark Radulich.
So tomorrow we will be doing a Damn You Hollywood for Maleficent, Mistress of Evil, because it's the season of the witch. By the time that happens, I will have taken my daughter on a daddy-daughter date.
I thought you were going to
Jesse.
say I would have taken my life.
Seems a bit much over a Disney movie. Wednesday, we got a doubleheader of shows. Myself and Sean Comer will be reviewing Insatiable Season 2, which stars our favorite Disney actress, Hey Jessie. That night, we will be reviewing an album with the future ex-Mrs. Starcher, Lacuna Coil, Black Anima. How about it?
Oh, love her.
Oh, look at that.
There you go.
Pat's excited. Now you've got some competition with Pat.
No, the voice really, I couldn't deal with that. But...
Yeah, you know what? That came up on the last album we talked about. She has a bit of a unique voice. We'll put it that way. I think
Thursday.
So am I the only one who's pumped about new music from Hootie and the Blowfish in this group?
Mark probably has a soft spot for that.
I'll put you on with my wife. She loves Hootie and the Blowfish. I took her earlier this year. She had a grand old time. And I didn't kill myself, so that was good. Speaking of which, on the 24th of October, we'll be doing On Trial from Dusk Till Dawn. Nothing on Friday, because then I got to run out and go see Zombieland 2. But Saturday night, I have twisted Robert's arm yet again. We will be doing commentary for Erickson Lubin versus Terrell Gosha on Showtime. And that's it. That's all for now.
Okay, all right.
I have found that if I do too many plugs, inevitably I have to start canceling more shows, and people get sick and can't do it. So that's all I'm telling you about.
Oh, okay, all right. So it's kind of like a little superstitious thing now. Well, that's fine. That is fine. That's a good idea too. Well, yeah, I think this is it. I don't have really anything else to plug. I will tell you again, go check out the Patreon. Listen, you can subscribe for additional content for $1 a month. We have a lot of stuff that was on the network previously that's no longer there. We are also putting up some extra content. Like I said previously, I discussed the first appearance of John Constantine, or Constantine, or Ham Sandwich, as Mark Radulich likes to call him. And then recently, with this one, right before this episode airs, I talked about the Mighty Thor 390, where Captain America first Steve Rogers picked up the hammer. So you can check that out, and I'll be doing more of those. I think as time goes on, I'll probably be just tying in like a quick 20-minute episode on something attached to whatever we're going to be discussing on Monday here on Source Material. So with that being said, for Evan Bevins, Mark Radulich, Pat Mullen, I'm Jesse Starcher. Thank you for joining us tonight. We'll talk to you next Monday. Have a great one. Bye-bye.
Thank you all for joining us. Make sure to give that Radulich in Broadcasting Facebook page a like to stay up on top of all the great podcasts we have to offer. We are at home on Spreaker, but you can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, and recently we have hit the air on Spotify. Find your favorite podcast platform and type in RADULICH to subscribe for some great content. If you enjoyed this show, please feel free to share and spread the word. And as always, we appreciate any feedback and look forward to entertaining you again soon.
Start the fucking show. Jesse, have you seen the new stats since Spreaker switched over their counting system?
No.
What about Podcoin? What's going on with that?
Hey.
Go fuck yourself. So
you've moved into the anger stage, Brief.
Well, everyone's just gonna have to do double shifts now.
So I'll do like a one show a month.
I don't know what we're talking about.
Wade Von Grawbadger.
Go back to Dupuy for a second. Is Dupuy here to talk about the institution of marriage?
Wow. I just want to get to the synopsis of the first 4 issues. What is his name? I have no idea. I don't even know.
Marko Djurdjevic.
Djurdjevic?
Call Robert Winfrey.
Marko Djurdjevic, who I really enjoyed from his time with the Sacramento Kings in the early 90s.
If people are doing a drinking game to this, like how many stupid dad jokes get made, and if at this point somebody doesn't have alcohol poisoning. Oh boy. You know, I wish in a series called Fear Itself.
And I remember specifically their
It was dance party time?
That was some Pokemon Go.
Why have you forsaken me? Nothing like Bible quotes to fuck you up, eh? It just...
Hey!
I thought she almost married the Vulture.
That was before she died the first time, right?
No, that was Dr. Octopus. She's more of a cougar than you realized, Mark. And can we all just take a minute to appreciate the fact that there is a long-running Marvel villain whose name is Ulick the Troll?
Do you think it's as good as when Jane Foster got the hammer? Shit!
I told you not to bring that up. Pat Mullen's going to be on the podcast. Over there sits Evan. He's being good.
I legit ducked.
I'm sure I cannot wait to read it and invite Pat Mullen on to talk about it.
When Love and Thunder comes out in a few years, we're doing it.
He will boycott the show.
I will. I'll never do another episode.
He'll never do. All right. I'm sure you'll catch fire the second half. All right.
Like fucking herpes, I'm gonna catch fire.
Yeah. Oh man.
That was a little much. I will not only have the highest point total, but the best overall record, thus making me the undisputed winner.
Your plugs are done, Pat. Okay, you're done, sir.
All right.
You okay there, Mark?
Eh?